Welcome back to Lead Pouring 101. So we're going to jump right into today's video because today's video is all about troubleshooting. I understand that a lot of you have been waiting on this because not getting complete pours can be very frustrating. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this down into 4 categories. They are the 4 categories that I believe are 99% of the problems associated with not getting complete pours. Category number 1 is going to be heat. Heat can be everything when it comes to lead pouring. We've touched on it a little bit in some of the other videos, but I'll kind of explain a little more in depth about heat. Category number 2 is going to be flow. So flow not only refers to the actual flow of lead coming out of your mold or out of your lead pot, but also the flow through the mold. Category number 3 is going to be direction. A lot of people overlook direction of the lead coming out of the pot into the mold. And then last but not least is going to be category number 4, which is fitment. Now, what does fitment mean? Fitment means the hooks and components that you're trying to put in your mold. Sometimes the fitment of those parts can cause your incomplete pour. So we're going to touch on all of that. Hopefully, all of this will make sense, come together, and help you guys out if you're having issues pouring your molds. So at some point in time, we've probably all poured a jig head that looks like this. Now, I poured this one in particular on purpose. I left the mold cold. I poured it as soon as my lead started to get hot enough to where it would actually pour out of the bottom. I had a cold hook. I did everything the exact way you're not supposed to do it. And as you can see here, these are the results. Now, heat. The thing that everybody new to this hobby wants to know is that magic number. What temperature should your mold be, and what temperature should your lead in your lead pot be? Well, unfortunately, that's one of the things with this hobby that's going to vary person to person. The reason being, these lead pots are not exact. Not every one of these lead pots is going to function in the same manner. These pots and the little needle valves are fairly inconsistent when it comes to pouring. The reason being, not everybody has the exact same lead. Some people's lead is going to have more impurities in it. Some's going to be harder. Some's going to be softer. There's so many variables, we can't give you just a magic, your temperature needs to be this. So what you're going to need to do when it comes to controlling the heat in your lead pot, I showed it in the last video, get one of these Lyman lead thermometers. This is the only one that I know of that is rated at a temperature that can withstand being put in that hot of lead. Because if you're trying to use a normal probe thermometer or even like an IR thermometer, you're not going to get accurate readings. You need that probe down in your lead pot. Now, when you're checking the temperature of your lead pot, after you plug your pot in and your lead gets melted, let it sit for like 10 minutes because the temperature is going to fluctuate from when you first plug in your pot. Because what's going to happen, your lead pot's just going to keep getting hotter and hotter and hotter. It's going to pass up. Say your temperature is set to here. Your lead pot is going to go up to here before it realizes that it's got to that temp, and then it'll slowly back down. So give your pot just a little bit of time. Let everything settle. If you need to clean it and flux it, do whatever you got to do. Let it sit for just a minute before you check your temperature. It's also not a bad idea to, as you're pouring, periodically check the temperature, because as you pour, if you cut all your sprues off and you put your sprues in the pot, that's a drastic change in temperature. If your lead is at 700 degrees and you put a 90-degree chunk of lead in there every time you pour a jig, your temperatures are going to fluctuate. So if you're having issues, say you start pouring and everything's going smooth, and then you see that you're starting to get incomplete pours and your productivity's dropping. Well, check your temperature again. You may have put so many sprues in there that you need to allow your pot to come back up to operating temperature. The same as if you're pouring a bunch of lead and you need to add another ingot. If you're putting a 1 pound or 2 pound ingot in your mold, that's going to drop your overall lead temperature significantly. So you may need to wait for it to come back up to temp. Now with your molds, it's a little bit easier to check your temperature of your mold. I know it's not the right way to do it. This is how I do it. Can I touch it? Is it going to burn me? Do I need to wear gloves? That's probably not the smartest idea, but that's the way I do it. I don't need my mold so hot that it's burning me. If it's to that point, it's too hot for my situation. Now you can take your IR gun like you would for your soft plastics or whatever you use it for and just scan your mold, see what the temperature is. You want to check those temperatures periodically because sometimes that can cause your issues. If your mold gets too hot, it can cause issues. If your mold's too hot, the lead takes too long to solidify and can actually leave you with voids in the head of your bait. So there are a lot of things that go into temperature control, and a lot of people overlook periodically checking their temp. They check it at the beginning and they're like, all right, I'm good to go, and they just roll with it. Well, as I mentioned, your temps, especially as your lead levels drop, if you need to add any more lead back in, you're fluctuating a lot. So it's a lot to think about, but once you kind of get a process going, you'll make everything much smoother for your lead pouring. All right, so category number 2 is going to be flow of lead. Say you've checked everything heat related and the heat is not solving your problem. Well, the next thing you need to look at is the flow of lead coming out of the bottom of your pot. So as you can see here, if I pull my handle, it's a nice, smooth, steady, fast flow of lead coming out of the pot. If you pull that handle and it's kind of spitting and sputtering or just dripping, or it doesn't look like it's coming out as fast as it used to, you may have some dirt and debris or something in the spout preventing the lead from coming out as fast as necessary. Now, the easiest way to do it, in my little tray, I just keep a little pick. And all you have to do with that pick, I'll put my gloves on here in a minute and show you, is just shove that pick up into the spout on the bottom and just kind of wiggle it around, move it up and down, and try to knock whatever piece of debris that's in there blocking your flow, knock it free, and that can help with your flow of lead. So that's what flow is referring to with your lead pot. Now, at the beginning, I mentioned the flow of lead through your mold. There are some molds that are just tricky, and they might need a little bit of help. And the molds that I'm referring to are going to be more on the lines of these cast aluminum molds. Cast aluminum is going to have a little bit rougher of a finish. It's not quite as smooth as a CNC mold. CNC molds, the lead is going to flow through that mold much, much easier. Now, Epic Bait Molds has recently started dipping their toes into the lead molds, and then you've also got Fat Guys Fishing with CNC lead molds, and then you can always go the custom route if you want, or there's a handful of small manufacturers that make them, but a CNC lead mold is going to flow much, much better than a cast lead mold. But a lot of us use cast molds because the number of molds that are out there is just incredible. So the amount or the options that we have with cast molds are really, really good. Well, as I've showed in the other video, that's where this dropout spray can come in. You can spray your molds with dropout spray, and that will increase the flow of lead through the mold. It puts a coating on the mold, just like smoking it with a candle or whatever option that you decide to go with. That helps the flow of lead through the mold. So let's say the heat didn't fix your issue, you have good flow coming out of your lead pot, and you're still just kind of having a little bit of trouble. Try coating your mold with something if you're using a cast mold, and that will increase the flow through the mold. And category number 3 is direction. For those of you that have been around the channel for any amount of time, have probably heard me say to aim the lead. Now, what does that mean? I know it's hard to see sometimes on camera because you hear me talk about hold that mold right up to the bottom of the spout. When you do that, it's hard for you guys to visually see what I'm talking about when I say aim the lead. So over here, I've got another picture drawn that's going to kind of, and this is an exaggerated example, but it'll kind of give you guys an idea of what I'm talking about when I say direction and aiming the lead. So at some point or another, you've probably seen something like this happen. Now, this is an exaggerated example, but your lead isn't always going to come perfectly straight down out of the pot. Sometimes it can be slightly angled to the left or the right or forward or backwards. So where that becomes a potential issue, so think of the second category we talked about with flow of lead. So if you're pouring your lead like this, you're holding your mold perfectly straight, but your lead is coming at a slight angle. The lead is going to hit the edge of the mold, plinko around before it actually makes it to the lead keeper. So the collars and the bait keepers are generally where all of your incomplete pours are going to be. The lead is not filling into this tiny part. Well, if your lead is going off to the side, all you need to do is aim the lead. So you want to align your mold with the hook. So you want your lead to flow perfectly straight through the cavity to where it doesn't come in contact with the mold in more places than necessary. That's going to allow the flow of lead to get to the bottom of the jig, which is where your incomplete pour is going to be faster and give you better results. So if your lead is slightly at an angle coming out of your pot, just match that angle with your mold, and that's going to give you a lot better success when it comes to pouring complete jig heads. And last but not least is fitment. Now, say you've got everything heat related under control. You've got a good flow of lead. You're aiming your mold. You're doing everything that we just talked about. You're still not getting complete pours. Well, that's where you need to start looking at fitment. Just because a hook and components fit in a mold and the mold closes doesn't mean that it actually fits. And I'll bring you down here and I'll show you some examples of fitment. So when it comes to fitment, I'll show you here an example of good fitment. So we're using the hook and the size that the mold recommends. You can see how that hook shank is nice and centered in the middle of where that lead collar is going to be. What that's going to do is allow you the maximum amount of space around the hook for that lead to fill in. Now if we were to swap that hook to another hook, while this hook fits in the mold closes, it doesn't actually fit. And what I mean by that is look at how much this hook is pulled over to the front. It's almost touching the edge of the mold right there. So just because this hook fits in the mold and the mold closes doesn't mean it's actually a good fit. You're going to have the back side of this collar fill in probably every time, but the front side of this collar you're going to have a lot of issues with. Now, does that mean a hook like this will never work? No. You can get everything hot enough and have a good enough flow of lead to where that will fill in, but your results are going to be very inconsistent and you're probably going to have quite a few issues with the front of that collar filling in. So when I talk about fitment, that's what I mean. Just because a hook fits in the mold and the mold closes doesn't mean that it's actually a good fit for that particular mold. There are some slight workarounds when it comes to things like this, and we'll cover all of that in our mold modification video. And one of the most common causes for improper hook fitment is playing with sizes. So as you all know, your mold is going to tell you based on the cavity what size hook they recommend, whether it's a 2/0, 3/0, 4/0, whatever the case. A lot of times you can kind of go up or down a hook size or two and it worked just fine. Well, that's something to look at if you're trying to substitute a smaller hook or a larger hook. Look at how much it pulls the shank of that hook away from the center of the lead collar, whether it's pulling it forward or backward. That could be causing your issues. Now, full circle, when I talk about aiming the lead, that can also play a big factor when you're talking about hook fitment. That particular mold that I just showed you, I have poured that cavity with that hook and it worked just fine. Now, if I just poured it normally, I would never get the front of that collar to fill. However, if I tilted my mold and aimed that lead towards the front of that collar a little bit more, the hot lead hit that part first, wrapped around the hook, and I got a complete pour. So you can see how all of these different categories kind of tie together. It's going to be hard to really, somebody's going to post a picture and ask a question, why isn't my jig filling in all the way? Well, it's probably one of those four things. Either your heat's not dialed in. You either have your lead too hot, too cold, your mold, hooks, components, everything. You need to get your temperature dialed. Once you have your temperature dialed in, you can eliminate that as a cause altogether. Then you just go down the line. Flow. Do you have a good flow of lead coming out of your mold? Do you have good flow going through your mold? Again, go with a CNC mold if you want to eliminate that altogether. CNC mold is going to give you the best flow of lead through the mold. If you're using a cast mold and you're having issues, spray dropout, smoke the mold, do whatever you want to do to increase your flow through the mold. Then move on to aiming your mold. If your lead's not coming perfectly straight down, which mine never does, I don't know if yours does, aim your mold. The Alabama rig video I made a few videos back, that is a mold. If you don't aim that mold, because that head cavity is tilted, if you don't aim that mold, it will never fill in complete. Mine doesn't. I have to aim that mold perfectly to get that mold to fill in. If your heat, flow, and your aiming and everything is good, look at the fitment of your components. Maybe you're trying to use too small of a hook, too large of a hook, and you're pulling that hook one direction or the other, and it's just not a good fit. It fits, but it doesn't. And for any of you curious for incomplete pours, what to do, well, I just grabbed mine with these little forceps. Hold it right down on the top of your lead for just a second. That lead will melt off of your hook, and you're ready to put that back in your mold and try again. So if you're having trouble filling in your molds and getting complete pours, one of those 4 things should be the answer. Follow each one of those. Do it step by step. Start with heat. Is your lead hot enough? Is your mold hot enough? For those of you that just want a rough idea, start with your lead around 750 to 800 degrees. That's going to give you a good starting point. You can tailor it from there to what is going to work best for you. Molds, preheating the molds. Me personally, I like my molds right at that 100-degree mark. 100 degrees seems to be hot enough to where the lead flows. I get nice complete pours, but it's not so hot that the lead takes too long to cool. Now flow. Flow is a visual thing. Look at the flow of lead coming out of your lead pot. Is it spitting and sputtering? Is it barely coming out? Those are things to look for. That's all a visual thing. Clean out the tip of your lead pot. Just run something up through it. That's another thing where cleaning and fluxing your lead can be important because you don't want all that contamination to settle and clog your spout. And again, with flow, you've got cast molds and CNC molds. If you want to eliminate the flow of lead through the mold, a CNC mold is going to be the better option. And then aiming the lead. Keep that in mind. Some molds, even though the lead can be coming straight down out of your pot, I've gotten better results just tilting it to one side or the other. If you're pouring a mold and say the front side of that mold, the lead collar isn't filling in all the way every time, tilt your mold just a little bit to allow that lead to hit that side of the collar first, and a lot of times that hotter lead will fill in around the side that's causing you issues, and you can get complete pours. So you not only just want to align your lead with the cavity, there are some molds where just tilting it off a little bit will help you get those complete pours. And then last but not least is fitment. So that mold that I showed you guys as an example, I have poured that mold and got complete pours. I made sure everything was hot. I made sure I had a good flow of lead, and I actually tilted my mold ever so slightly to where the hook was pulled towards the front of that cavity. The lead hit that part of the cavity first, and it fills in completely. But there are some situations where that hook will be pulled too far to one side or the other, and it won't work. So if you're playing around with hook sizes, just take a look at that, at how well the hook fits in the center of that lead collar. But hopefully this video helps you guys. As you can see, all of those categories kind of come together in some way or another. As long as you have all 4 of those things in line, your heat, your flow, your aiming, and your fitment, if everything's dialed, you should be getting complete pours. Some molds are going to pour much easier than others, so you're just going to have to kind of play around with it. Just like on the soft plastic side of things, some molds shoot better hotter, colder, faster, slower. Some of the molds with the lead are the same way. You're going to have to kind of play around with it and see which one works. But if you're not checking the temperature of your mold, or you're not paying attention to the flow, it's going to be much harder for you to diagnose what your problem is. So that's where some of these things that are commonly overlooked, hopefully this video sheds some light on that, and you guys can kind of keep track on that. Because if you have no idea what temperature your molds are when you're pouring, you're not going to be able to eliminate that as a possibility for incomplete pours. And just remember, if you pour something and it doesn't fill in, It's not a failure, it's feedback. Take that feedback, learn from it. You're never going to waste a jig head. You can always take that jig, put it back in your lead pot, melt it down, start over. Hopefully you guys liked this video and it was helpful, and I hope you're liking this series. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you on the next one.